Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Before we officially start the session, we would have a minute of silence for Sabine Mahmood, who was shot yesterday in a horrendous incident. Thank you.
The topic for our next session is reading in early grades. The speaker for this session are Thomas LeBlanc and Arfa Sayeda Zehra. The session will be moderated by Sidra Iqbal. Sidra Iqbal is a celebrated television journalist and a passionate development activist. She is the first Pakistani to be presented the GR8 Women Award for Journalism 2014 by the government of UAE and the Indian Television Academy. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me here, and it's such a pleasure to be moderating a session about this very, very important theme of reading. And thank you for beginning this session by offering your condolences and your tribute to Sabine Mahmood. I would like to begin this session with a quote of hers where she was repeatedly said to be saying that fear is just a line in your mind, and it is really a matter of choice of what side of that line would you like to stand upon. I think today as a nation we mourn an amazing advocate who stood for pluralism, for diversity, for hope and inspiration, and I hope that her legacy continues to inspire us to move forward in life. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme that we have before us today is a very important one, and we have enough significance and importance attached to it. Let me begin by introducing my wonderful panelists to you. Unfortunately, we've lost one of our panelists, but that would just give us more room for Q&A, and I hope that we'll keep it as engaging as we can make it to be. First up, of course, we have Professor Dr. Arfa Sayeda Zehra. She's an acclaimed scholar and academician. She holds a doctorate in intellectual history from the University of Hawaii, USA, as well as a master's degree in South Asian studies. Her forte is literary criticism and appreciation. A prolific researcher, she has numerous studies and publications to her credit. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Arfa Sayeda Zehra. We're also very fortunate to have on this panel Dr. Thomas LeBlanc. He's the Education Director at USAID Pakistan. He's responsible for setting the agenda and developing the strategic vision for the agency's education portfolio and oversees the design and management of USAID's education assistances to Pakistan. One of the pioneering projects that, of course, is a part of this holistic strategy is the Reading Project, and we'll learn more about him and the project during the course of this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Thomas LeBlanc. Reading is essentially a part of any culture, and especially so in the South Asian culture. And even today, when we have this huge debate about our identity, on what side of the prism, how do we define our identity? Some see ourselves to be more Muslim than Pakistani. So even if you look at it that way, Islam in itself emphasizes reading and reflection to a great degree. If you look at the first 5 verses of Quran, unanimously agreed to be the first revelation in Islam, it reads as, Iqra bi ismi rabbika allazi khalaq. Read in the name of thy Lord. And therefore the emphasis on reading is there, but somehow along the way, especially if you look at the culture around us, we haven't been paying attention. We read not for the sake of understanding and reflection, but perhaps for other motives, and in other parts of our societies we don't read at all. So that's the dilemma we have before us. How do we encourage it for young students, especially in the early grades? And one of the things that has been, of course, come out of this discourse is the Reading Project itself. Dr. Thomas, if I may roll the ball towards you and first begin by asking what the Reading Project is all about and the key objectives of starting this pioneering program in Pakistan.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. So the Pakistan Reading Project is our flagship basic education program for USAID. And basically the idea behind it is that we need to improve reading in the first 2 grades of primary school. Research shows that if a child learns to read in the first 2 years of primary, then the child can read to learn for life. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. Once you learn to ride a bicycle, you never forget. The same thing applies to reading. So what we have is a project that is going to focus on teaching teachers how to teach reading in the first 2 grades. And we're doing it across the country. But it's not really a national program in the sense that we'll be in every single school. It's really a pilot where we're trying to test different ways that work, and then the idea would be to bring it up to scale. So we're doing a lot of teacher training, but we're also doing development of reading materials for the first 2 years. So the research also shows that a child can learn to read if they can learn to read in the language they understand. So ideally in their mother tongue. So the idea is that we should be producing reading materials in a language the child understands so that they can decode the symbols that they're seeing with the words that they're hearing that they already understand. If you don't approach it like that, then the way that it's being approached is as a foreign language. And then the child has no idea, does not understand what they're repeating. They're just memorizing something without having any clue what it really means. And what we want to do is regenerate a culture of reading in Pakistan through this method. And by doing this, we believe it's going to have a dramatic impact on the culture of reading in Pakistan and on the quality of education. So, for example, we know that there are somewhere between 5 to 6 million children between the ages of 5 and 9 who are not in school. And what we need to do is get those children back in school to provide access, but then we need to give them a quality education. And for USAID, that means providing reading. So an overarching activity that the Pakistan Reading Project will also do is to try to introduce a policy of reading across the country in all the different provinces. And the idea is that reading should be a part of the daily curriculum. So there should be ideally 60 minutes every day during the first 2 years devoted to learning reading. And that is our goal.
Right.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Thomas, for that, for those initial thoughts. It's a very ambitious project to have to begin with, looking at the kind of challenges you have before us. The literacy rate in the country is really low, and then the kind of content that is available, the teacher training, how do you spark a child's imagination to be inclined towards reading is the mammoth challenge that you have before you. Dr. Arfa, if we look at our society, what has happened? I mean, reading used to be essentially a part of us. People used to assume that even housewives, since they had very little opportunity and they had very few engagement activities outside of their homes, there used to be this culture of reading digests, and somehow the children would take after their parents and see that there were small libraries at home. Now the libraries not only have vanished from our schools and universities, but they've gone away from our homes as well. So what do you think? Where did we go wrong?
The most difficult question in Pakistan is to pinpoint where did we go wrong in every sphere of life. Let me thank you first, and thank you, Dr. Thomas LeBlanc, for inviting me to this discussion. I am so hopeful that you used the word regenerating a culture. And it's embarrassing for me to accept that we were basically a culture of reading, which will generate into understanding, which will then move on towards a dialogue. So we will be listening, and if there is a comprehension, if there is a dialogue, and if there is a counseling, psychologists and psychoanalysts call it today a culture of counseling. So basically the Eastern cultures are a culture of counseling. But maybe through our political experience, our culture got into a culture of regimentation. And this has come through political pathways. And regimentation has not only come through the military rules, it is becoming from a different part of mindsets that are more regimenting our academic life or our intellectual life or our educated life than anything else. We have gone so aversive of our own regional languages, which I call language of a child's environment, whatever that language is. But we have gone so afraid of it, and we think, oh, it will generate separation, it will generate alienation, but we forget that the first thing familiarity of a language generates is clearing the perceptions. And if a child's perceptions are cleared, then you can put any word to it. Then words do not become a block in understanding. The other thing is, why don't we read? While Zubaida Jalal is sitting here and Haruna Jatoi, two people who have been responsible for education, we have limited our child only to information, not to knowledge. Because when you wish to give a knowledge, you have to make them active readers. Because active reading generates critical thinking. And critical thinking in our culture, if you let me use a Urdu word, is becoming haram. No critical thinking. We should become rubber stamps. When you become rubber stamps, then you have no idea either of personal growth or a societal growth or a national growth. So your whole curricula stops people from growing. Growing comes through identity. The first identity we push away is the regional identity, the language identity. And why it has come so? Because to my dismay and to real shame, education has become so politicized that we do not think that education is a value. It's not a commodity. So when you transfer a value into a commodity, this is what you reap, that we are reaping today. We can go into a political jargon, but the best thing in first 2 years of a school, for me, it is that it gives a child a chance to run his or her imagination wild. And that wild imagination opens gateways of understanding life in a very, very simple way. But then through understanding those simple things in their own language, they are able to, ready to understand complex things. And they are not much more complex life in the world as we are facing today in Pakistan. Because we do not read, because we believe whatever somebody else is saying, we don't try to find it. And sometime, I'm sure in this today's discussion there will come questions about books, that what about books and what about the
quality of content.
The quality of content that is coming. We are neglecting education, and sometimes I feel very purposefully, because it's very easy to misguide the ignorant than to misguide a well-educated person.
But I think that's a very valid point, and these opening remarks, in fact, are paving the way for this discussion to move forward. I would like to spend a few minutes to actually probe both my panelists to think about what could be the purpose of reading. As you pointed out, to the history and the legacy we've had in the yesteryears, but today I see more and more parents seeing any form of activity that their children engage in to be more transactional. They would like to know what are the benefits that they will reap out of it. Oh, if you're going to go for badminton, then are you going to get a sports scholarship? Are you good at it? Are you going to spend some time, extra time in tuition, so will that mean more academic excellence or better grades? That transactional nature of seeing whatever the child is spending their time on should have an immediate benefit or advantage. Do you think that is where we are flawed? Open to both.
Would you like to? Please.
So for me, I view reading as a foundational skill. and I view it as transformational. It transforms people's lives, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. And for us at USAID, the most important thing about reading is that it leads to higher levels of development. And we know through the research that there are many findings that show that those who know how to read and who get an education have a higher quality of life. The family has a higher quality of life. They make more money. They contribute to the economy. The country grows and modernizes and becomes stable. And so we think that that's how reading is transformational. And for us, it's really important to address the marginalized population. So those parts of the country that are in the far-flung parts of the country. And also making sure that girls are getting an education. We know that a lot less girls go to school than boys, and a lot more girls drop out for various reasons. And what we think is that if we can introduce a high-quality education through reading as a foundational skill, that will set the groundwork for future development.
Okay.
Thank you for putting in one very key word, transactional. That is what we are really, we want to trade things. Earlier, education was to reward for you, was a reward. It was going to award you something in life. Now we say what it will pay us. So we have shifted the whole emphasis of education. Is it the education only for employment, or is it the education for life? When a child goes to a school, at that point of time, there is no word employment in his life. He wants to know more. And to know more, first thing is to know himself, his surroundings, and whatever is familiar to him or her. When we see, I'm very grateful that Dr. Thomas is explaining the purpose of this project and how they would like to see the reading to be promoted in Pakistan. I would have loved to have this conversation today in Urdu. We are talking about regional languages, we are talking about a national language which we shy of accepting it, but at least it is a language which is understood across borders, across ethnicities, across political boundaries. This is one language which is understood. For a child's education, and I agree with you that the best education always comes, the first impressions are made in the very early years of our life. How public education, and I will include here the private education also, has suffered. They both have agenda for education, but the child is not part of the agenda. The education is supposed for a child in private too and in public, but the child is not the focus. We don't see to the need of the child what we need to give it to them. We always see what we feel, we prefer
Is the ideal education.
for the children to be educated in. So the first thing is that we totally demolish their imaginative fantasy world. The first thing to read in 2 years should be nothing but fiction, stories. And you can teach realities through stories. They will be much more acceptable than giving them 2 + 2 4. If you give them formulas, difficult to understand. But if you tell them a story, very easy to understand. So we have to come to the level of the understanding and the intelligence of a child. And what a story gives basically, it does not give you only a functional intelligence, it enhances emotional intelligence. With a story, child is associated. Or sometimes, child, or even today, if I read a story, I'll become one of the characters, whatever I choose to be.
But Dr. Arfa, if I may interject, is that even desirable? And I ask you this question because for the sake of my audience, I'd like to flag 2 important words that my panelists used here. Number one, the process of regenerating that environment. It wasn't very long ago, if you look at the history of the undivided British India, our forefathers, our previous generation, maybe our great-grandfathers, knew more languages than we did. They probably knew Persian, they knew Hindi, Sanskrit, a regional language, maybe more regional languages. I come from a family of traders. अब आ रही है आपको मेरी आवाज़? अब आ रही है मेरी आवाज़? चलें, I'm going to hold this one up. So what I was talking about is if you go back a few years, our previous generations knew many more languages, and somehow we lost it along the way. And then you mentioned the subject or the process of transformation. Why I raise this question, that is that even desirable? Because each time a child submerses himself in that world of imagination, we shun them out. Case in point, pre-teen or teenage girls, when they're reading some stories or novels, and we have often seen them, and I've personally experienced that, your parents shunning you off and saying, आप तो खुद अपने आप को कोई character समझने लग गई हैं, ये दियो मलाई कहानियों में रहने वाले लोग हैं. So you know that imagination is actually shunned upon. So here we are trying to encourage it, whereas there is a huge section of society that does not see it to be desirable.
A very interesting question. You use the word Dev Malai. Why do people go into myths when realities disappoint them? If there is enough energy in the realities to strengthen them, to make them understand life, they will not go into myths. Myths are the desired ideals, perhaps you can say, and you can shape those desired ideals through education. What is happening to our curricula and syllabi? Only focused on a certain subject, certain discipline, not encouraging any extra reading, as it is called these days.
Yeah.
When teachers find someone reading a good book, they say, क्या पढ़ते रहते हो बेकार बातें, कोर्स की किताब पढ़ा करो. And the parents always say that, why are you studying something extra reading, because you should be concentrating more on your course
Science ki kitab
so
padho.
that you get a good grade. So the whole education is coming to a good grade, not to a good understanding, not to a good intelligence, not to a good person. So first we have to really define that. And when I say that let child in first 2 years, this is my experience of all my life, let their imagination go wild. Let them get familiarized with their own environment. That will give them a confidence. Confidence who they are, where they are, what is around them. And education does one thing very secretively, but in a very mystic way, philosophically. It changes you without your knowing that you are changing. It changes you somewhere. A child may not be very proud that I have learned 10 new words today, but in 10 days he will be using those 10 words and he would be becoming a more confident person in his conversation. What has happened in this society? We stopped reading, so we stopped sharing. We stopped sharing, so there is no dialogue. When there is no dialogue, Sabine Haq and many more like her would be targeted. It is a lack of dialogue. And why lack of dialogue? Because we think whatever I have read and whatever is said by me is final. There is no room for anyone else. All of us think we are Mir Taqi Mir Mustanad hai mera farmaya hua. All of us not Mustanad. We are not that certified. You have to give a room for your child, not to only have that he has, by the age of 6, he knows geography and he knows history and he knows maths and he knows English and he knows Urdu. And I like your question that this society was multilingual in its spirit. Every child in your home is today trilingual. Even today, they know their regional language, they know Urdu, they know English. And the Arabic is the fourth one. They don't know it, but they can read it. They don't know anything about it, and that is why we have kept it a secret. Because if they come to know what is in their language, the mullah would be out. The authority, it's a power paradigm. It's a power paradigm. And I'm sure Zubaida Jalal would be remembering that. She was the Minister of Education when the chairperson Lahore. Okay, all of us were so excited that how suddenly, after all these years when the world was made, the whole universe was made, the science is Islamized. And the book says, Inshallah, जब oxygen, माशाल्लाह, hydrogen से मिलेगी, तो सुभान अल्लाह पानी बन जाएगी. You are confusing a child. You are confusing a child. And this is not a joke. This is when you confuse a child, when you blur the perceptions, when you don't give him a chance to imagine, you are not giving a chance for critical thinking. And we get always afraid. And the father would be saying, I don't know 3 languages, why should you be knowing 3 languages, as you say. Earlier, this society was not aversive of knowledge. Today we are aversive of knowledge, but very fond of certificates.
True.
Very fond of certificates.
Just like we had that old adage saying, "Hath kangan ko arsi kya, padhe likhe ko farsi kya." Today there are people who would argue and turn around and say, maybe our national anthem is not in Urdu but in Persian.
No, so they will ask you what is hath, what is kangan, what is arsi. First, and then they'll say, what? What do you mean? And how the mirror comes in. What is the bangle doing with my hand? Okay. Those you have taken. Or the idioms are all made by cultural concepts. Ask somebody, what does it mean, 9 do 11 ho jana? Yeah, I ask you all. Why do we say 9 do 11 ho gaya? You're right, separate it. 9 plus 2, 11, and you write 1 and 1. So they are not added.
They're not a single digit anymore.
No more a single. So, but we don't have that concept of numbers now. We don't know that concept. So because that concept is not there, an idiom doesn't make us anything. The question for a child is that we have to help a child to find herself or himself. What we are doing, that how to lose your own self. Everybody should be a doctor, everybody should be an engineer. Then suddenly the MBA came in. But now it is the idea of IT education. In 1960s in Lahore, I can tell you, it was a period when the whole city was Darul Kebab. It was 1960 phenomenon. The whole city became Darul Kebab. 70s, the whole city became burgers,
Bun
kebab, pizza. 80s became Cambridge School, Oxford School, Harvard School. Every name you take of a Western city, there is a school that. And then by the 80s we came, it was everything computerized. Technical education. Like your फाल वाले कहते हैं ना कि जी ये तावीज़ ले लीजिए तो महबूब आपके कदमों में. So now the IT people have started saying it that if you learn this, the life is right here at your feet. They don't give you a chance to strive for that. We could not make education competitive for our children. We have made it combative. So one has to understand the difference between competition and combat.
To break it down, whenever we use the term technology, it's only a means or a certain way of doing things. Today the technology may be the computers, tomorrow it could be something else altogether. Today you use a certain kind of a vehicle, but it could be a different locomotive altogether in the future. So Dr. Thomas, each one of these devices and gadgets, they come with their own influence and philosophy. Do you think reading, because we were having an earlier discussion and we said, but printing is expensive, finding people to write and then to publish that, and then the affordability of this book is going to be a big question mark. The question arises, today technology brings in so much more reading content to everyone, free of cost, but that hasn't really taken the reading curve upwards. Where do you think the challenge lies?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to go back to the whole idea of transformation.
Yes.
So to me, education is transformational. And it transforms the individual, because when a child learns to read, to decode symbols and sounds, then that child's mind is actually changing. So there are all these connections that are happening inside of the brain. And then once those are made, then that person's life is changed forever. And then when you multiply that by everyone, then you can transform society, because then you get the critical thinking. So I wanted to make that point. In terms of technology, I agree. Technology is critical, and everyone should have access to it, but most people don't. A lot of people have never seen a computer. A lot of people have never seen a smartphone. And so you need to be able to provide reading materials to people who otherwise would not have them. That's why we focus so much on the marginalized populations in Pakistan, those people who don't have access to any technology. But still, for example, in the Pakistan Reading Project, we're introducing technology. We're going to have tablets that we will give to teachers who we train to teach reading, and they will have these tablets with all of these examples of good teaching practices for reading right on the tablet that they can look at and emulate. So we are introducing it that way. And then that can also have a transformative effect on students, on the individual pupils, because they will see their teacher with this tablet and say, whoa, what's that? And maybe they'll look at it and be able to get some kind of exposure to this technology that is inevitable for the future. So we see this all happening. We're going in this direction with technology. What we have to do is harness it and use it and expose people to it to the greatest extent possible, but realistically. Given how much it would cost to give everybody a tablet, that is probably prohibitive, but we can at least start in this direction and build up. And again, this Pakistan Reading Project, it's a pilot that we would like to see go nationwide. For the last 2 weeks, we sent a number of officials from all across the country, education officials, to Egypt to see where we had a reading project that was just started out as a small pilot that the government of Egypt embraced and said, no, we need this to go nationwide. And that's the kind of thing that we need to do here in Pakistan.
Right. But that's the good side of technology. There are other downsides as well. There are people who are going to argue, about the cost of it all. There are reports that are now coming in that if a child is using the tablet at a much younger age, his ability to maneuver a pen may be hampered. And like all of us, we are so dependent on Microsoft Office that we can't spell things right. We always need a spell check. We can rather type but not write with our own hands. And there are always going to be these challenges. Dr. Arfa, how do you think technology is actually, is it helping us? Is it actually sparking our imagination to gather more information, and that whole connection you drew between information, knowledge and wisdom? Are we on that right track?
Thank you for this question. Maybe you have asked me because I appear to look like from BC, but
Not at all.
the first thing with technology. Now, if I read a book on Kindle, written by A.H. Nair, I don't see him. Published by Amina Sayed, I don't see her. And I need a verification from Zubaida Jalal, so I have to send her an email which waits for that. So that personal touch is gone again there. I'm not against technology, but what should be the technology? Should the technology capture us, or should we capture technology? The basic question is that. And can we create a balance? We don't have to give one up for the other. Can we create a balance? And then you see, the dichotomy of words I would love to tell you. We say we have social media. This social media is making us all unsocial.
Antisocial rather.
Rather, antisocial. We are only to one screen, whether it is big or small, no matter. And we are confining ourselves. The art of conversation is going out. It's an art. It's a beauty. We don't know really how to converse with each other. Why we can't converse? Because we don't read. Reading does one thing. Not only that it adds to our vocabulary, it gives different hues of meaning to the same word. And then it also tells you that how this word was being written 50 years ago, and how we have changed the simple writing. There are many basic skills that I think should not be given up. As you said, no more the spellings. And I always said that Britishers colonized us and they wanted to speak King's English. Now, out of a sheer revenge, if you read the SMS or WhatsApp or what not, and the syntax, the spellings, the meanings which are written there, that is the greatest revenge we could take. But we don't realize that by satisfying ourselves superficially on a psychological level, we are simply demolishing our knowledge base.
Right.
Any language is to be respected, and every language is to be respected. These things give you, they don't snatch anything from you. And now that you say we are giving tablets, I'll request you, sir, in your pilot project, if it can be accommodated, I have a personal request. Train teachers to read. Train teachers to read and train teachers to present whatever they have read. Ask them to write an abstract of a story. And let's see how they write. They won't be able to. They won't be able to.
I think you're pointing towards the comprehension skills, but Dr. Arfa, also what about the interpretive reading? I mean, we're a generation, when we were kids, we still grew up watching Mr. Zia Muhyiddin, Mr. Talat Hussain and the others do interpretive reading on the screen that we could absorb, and we knew exactly how words needed to be emphasized, paused upon, pronounced. But today when teachers, when they're reading out loud to a class, it barely ever excites them enough to take it up.
Thank you, but if you do not comprehend, how will you teach? The first thing, you have to comprehend what you are teaching, and then we are not putting any emphasis on the teaching of languages. What of regional? What of national? Or even what of English? I teach very young students even today. Maybe it is my greed to remain in touch with the young minds. They have a cell phone all the time in there, and the world is not changing as rapidly as they wish to. So out of 30 minutes conversation, 29 minutes are, what next? What's up? And if they're speaking in Punjabi, then they are only asking, aur ki haal hai? The hal is not changing. So we have tried to really not to benefit.
Dr. Arfa, I would hate to break your heart, but since you're dealing with younger readers and younger students there, the step after that is even worse. I often speak at colleges and their texts are, Janu, abhi thodi der mein aati hu bahar. So that's even worse. So you don't want to take the next step after it. But, on a more serious note, I have a question. Whenever a writer, after he has taken in all the information and is trying to write an essay or a piece, they've been edgy. They've ruffled many feathers here and there. And it is a time bomb that is assembled right now, but you wait till it is published and when it gets to people's hand to get that reaction. And people say that delayed reaction has caused a lot of book hunting, book burning expedites or book banning in the past. But today, you see that expedited into a very, very distressful phenomena. You have young people who are responding and who are engaging in hate speech, in a lot of violent speech over the social media, and the psychologists point that because they're unable to see the reaction of the words and the pain that they may be inflicting, it's all right for them. How are the two situations different?
Very easy. When we need to tell somebody that give me a missed call, how do we say it in our vernacular? Mujhe ek missed call marna. It's marna, the aggressive word. And the best thing that I heard in a very formal dinner, they said, wo meetha zara idhar marna. So they may appear jokes, but they are not. This is how, when your attitudes are, when your mindset is changing, your language is changing. On everything that we don't like, we say, goli maro. Now for dislike, we have only one thing, put a bullet in it. So the society is being reflective. They are also shaping us. We have to make our child read a book, an interesting story, engage their imagination. Engage their imagination before they start mortifying everything. Kal maro, goli maro, meetha idhar maro. That is to me, that is simply unacceptable, baffling. And then you see that if I am given ever a chance, I will ban one thing. A book should never be banned, no matter how bad, how much we differ with it.
How edgy.
How edgy, how much we differ with the theme. It should never be banned because we should know what is the alternate of thinking.
The counter argument.
Yes.
I think, Dr. Arfa, that's an excellent note to now open the question answers from our audience. I'm sure that they have many burning thoughts and questions and ideas in their minds. So if you can kindly identify yourself and a mic will be directed. My only request would be to keep it to a concise question and not provocative, long monologues. That would be appreciated.
A precise question, and I won't be very long. I just wanted to share an observation of a teacher of a teacher.
See what technology does?
Dr. Thomas LeBlanc and myself, we went to the same institution, and one of our professors came here and he visited along with me and some other colleagues a far-flung area, a school in Balochistan. And once students saw that some foreigner was coming, they started to extensify the rata. Like Qaid-e-Azam kab paida hue, kab fauth hue, Allama Iqbal kab paida hue, Pakistan kab bana. So they were memorizing. He did not understand what were they saying, but he understood that they were repeating same thing over and over. And he very quietly asked me, he said, Haruna, what are they trying to do? I said, they are trying to memorize the important dates of history. He said, at this tender stage, if you teach them to read, whenever they need a date, they can refer to the book. So that is the philosophy, and that's also my answer to what Arfa said, that where are we wrong? We are wrong from the very premises of laying the foundation for education. We ask them to reproduce. The questions in the examinations are textbook related, not concept related. They are not according to the curriculum contents. And all of this as a package is leading us to where we are. And I'm very appreciative of Reading Project that they are at least trying to re-inculcate that habit of reading, which is very important.
Thank you very much for that. You've pointed to a teaching dilemma that people have today. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Adnan Khan. I think we've actually conflated two issues and moved away from the original thing. We're talking of early grade reading, which allows a person to read and get into what we've been discussing, which is eudaimonic reading, reading for good life. And good life, and that becomes more of an economic issue rather than actually because for a good life you need to have economic means. What you're talking about is people are spending more time earning an income and not being able to do it, and that's what's going to happen when their economic life is constrained by the state. That's a completely different thing. What we're talking about here is the reality for about 25 million children on a basis who can't even get a simple enough reading to actually even talk about good life, let alone have any chance of it. So can we actually come back to early reading and what can be done to promote it as it says here?
I respect your comment, but I see the two to be very interconnected. You can't have people being inclined to reading where their basic economics and their pursuit for a good life are a different realm altogether. But I'd let Dr. Thomas respond to that. Would you have different insights on this, sir?
Thank you very much. Before I answer that question, what I want to mention is that we are accepting your challenge to have teachers learn to read so that they can then teach reading to children.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's all about, and it goes back to your comments, which is how are we going to do this? And the Pakistan Reading Project is going to do this by focusing on the teachers, by giving them an enormous amount of teacher training and going back and seeing them and seeing, okay, what are the problems you're facing? How can we overcome these problems to make sure that the children learn to read? We've already measured a baseline of the quality of reading right now across the country, and it's really dismal. But we have the baseline. Now we're going to have the intervention where the teachers get all this training, and then we're going to test the children again. And I believe that we are going to see a transformational effect. I believe that we will see the quality of reading go up among young children, which will have a dynamo effect on the rest of their education. And that's why we sent people to Egypt, because it worked there. We did the same thing there, and we showed Pakistanis, okay, this is what they did in Egypt. Now it's up to you. You are the leaders of Pakistan. You need to make this happen. And that's how we're going to do this. And this will transform people's lives. That's our belief.
True. In fact, just adding to it, there are 5 T's to the reading project. If you'd like to expand upon them, there's a text, there's a teacher, the training that is involved, of course the testing of the same skills, whether they have been imparted to the teachers properly, and technology. So they are going to help you out.
Thank you very much for your question, and I feel sorry that you thought that we got off the track, but I find that we were very much on the track, that we should induce, invite, inculcate a habit of reading. And how we can reach for this habit to children is when the teacher is ready to read more than the curricula, more than the textbooks, or something, as you say, 60 minutes per day. Very good. But that 60 minutes is not a very structured discipline, but any reading that they would like to listen, maybe a story, maybe a news, maybe a discussion, or anything that prepares for them. So I don't think that this discussion has gone, and being a moderator like her, which she brings back to the track all the time, we went ahead, and I will again say it. The reading is not something, an oasis or an island in itself. It is connected with other educational activities, and through that you can bring the child to read. And first you have to make them understand the importance of reading to the teacher, and then it will go to the society much later. But the first 2 years of a child's education, my dream is that they are educated, or they are made to learn in their own languages of their own environment, which I don't say that they are regional or anything, or Urdu or anything, so that their imagination is nurtured. Education is to transform through your imagination. It does not transform through a uniform, which we have thought it will.
Dr. Arfa, in the interest of time, and I see several hands
Yes,
going
please.
up, can we please take questions and not comments? And if maybe we can take 3 of the questions together before we go to the responses. Yes, no.
थैंक यू सर। डॉक्टर साहब, आपको सुनना बहुत अच्छा लगता है, हमेशा ज़हन और दिल से वो जंग जो है वो उतर जाता है। सुनते हैं, कहते हैं शुभ शुभ बोलो, अच्छा सुनो, अच्छा देखो, अच्छा बोलो। बच्चों से एक तो दोस्ती कैसे हो सकती है, ये इसका कोई तरीका जरूर बताइए, क्योंकि वो उनको कुछ और अच्छा लगता है, हमें कुछ और अच्छा लगता है, एक गैप रहता है हमेशा से। एक तो और दूसरा ये कि एडिटोरियल जो है, कि जब आप किताबों से दोस्ती का एक सिलसिला शुरू करें, तो उसमें एक टीचर के लिए और पेरेंट्स के लिए वो एक एडिटर का रोल किस तरह से होगा। एक बात, अगर खुद किताबों से शौक नहीं है लेकिन दिल चाहे कि बच्चे पढ़ा करें, तो क्या किया जाए। And the second thing, I want to thank Thomas for initiating this project, and out of curiosity I just want to ask, is there any US reading project in US as well? I really wanted to thank that you come up with this project. I was just asking out of curiosity, is there any US reading project in USA as well from your side? Yeah.
Oh yeah, let me answer that real quick. We take reading real serious in the U.S. We have a lot of reading programs. So the U.S. Education system is very similar to Pakistan in the sense that we have a federal government and we have state governments. And so right now there's a huge push for reading in the U.S. And believe me, we have our problems. We have a lot of problems with young children who don't know how to read because they're not being taught reading by their teachers. We have big problems in that area. But it's across the spectrum. We have the bell-shaped curve where you have a lot of people who can read some who can read a lot, and some who can't read at all. And we're tackling these issues all the time in the U.S. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, we're not perfect, believe me.
So can we have a few questions from the back of the room as well, please?
Can I
Can
just come into Noor's in one minute?
Can we bring it to
Noor,
the
thank you
gentleman
very
in the
much for
glasses
asking
here?
me the question in English, but for the benefit of my very respected colleague, I will answer it in English. You said how we can get to know each other.
Can be friends with kids.
Okay. The thing is how we can understand the kids and bring them together and patch up the differences. In English, we fall in love. We should stand in love.
Rise in love, rather.
Don't fall in love, rise in love, stand in love. And then you have to understand a child as a child. We try to understand a child as an adult, and that is where the dichotomy comes. You can make them love books. If they cannot read out to them. If they don't understand the language, translate it to them. If they don't understand the words, bring it down to their understanding. That's the one way. How we do wish to make a child our friend, that he should or she should follow whatever we are saying. So they are very good friends. No, it cannot happen like that.
And also, I think it points to the fact that parenting cannot be outsourced to schools. It's a very integral part of your own environment, and you should be taking interest in that. Your question, sir.
Assalamu alaikum ji, I'm Talha. Thank you for a very interesting discussion. I have two kids, toddlers, 4 and 5 years age. I have rooms full of books, the shelves and all, but then the laptops and tablets get their attention and interest all the time. So, can reading be compensated by these apps and interactive games, and learning can be met through those tools, and then to what extent?
Okay, thank you for that question. Can we take one more question? I think the lady here had one. The lady in front.
There too, one lady there.
I just wanted the back of the room to be involved as well. We'll come back to you. I'm sorry. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sayeda, and I wanted to ask one question. How are you going to?
Yes.
How are you going to integrate your reading project for teaching English skills, specifically reading skills, and other foreign languages in Pakistan?
Sure.
Because they are also taught at primary level.
Sure. Foreign
as
language
the
as
other
well as technology and apps.
languages.
Thank you for those two questions. We'll bring the mic up here while I let my panel respond to it. Do you think the apps and the tablets and the smartphones compensate for the lack of reading in our lives?
I think they complement. I think it's really good to have as much technology as you can. If you can afford it, go for it. Because I really think it can have a very positive influence on children's development. I think, though, that there's a middle path. You don't want to go too much to one extreme or the other extreme. You want to be able to have them have access to all these things, but not too much. Because you also want them to go out and play and that sort of thing. You want them to read books as well. In terms of teaching foreign languages, the key is to teach reading in a language the child understands first, so that you create the neural connections in the brain. Once that's done, then it's extremely easy for a child to learn other languages. But if you try to teach the child reading in a language they don't understand, all they'll be doing is memorizing and not have a clue of what they're saying. And so you won't develop the critical thinking skills. So we really believe deeply that if you can get the child to learn to read in the first 2 years, then they can read for life, for the rest of their life, languages, math, science, everything. But you need that foundation in reading first. I know that there are some children who are really bright who can learn reading in a foreign language. I know a lot of people were forced to do this, but the vast majority of people, what the research shows is that in order to create the neural connections, a child must be able to look at the symbols they're seeing and associate it with a sound. And then that creates the neural connections. And then after 2 years, those neural connections are there and they're not going anywhere. Again, it's like learning to ride a bike.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Officially, our time's up. And now I'm doing what even the Election Commission did not do, that is allowing extra polling time. So we'll take just a few more before we can come to a close. Can we please, okay. You're too nice. You won't get a chance then.
Hello. That was a little too loud. Mr. Thomas LeBlanc, my question is to you. You know, for reading, again, the teachers have to be prepared. So how long are your training programs? Because I'm an educationist and I know how long it takes us to train teachers. And number one is that, and then as you've got the baseline, which is very dismal, of reading skills of the teachers as well, so how long do you think that's going to take? And you mentioned about the success in Egypt. Well, I'm very glad about that because just 4 years ago, I had gone through the British Council for a reading program in England. And there were people from 5 countries, and there was a representative from Egypt as well. He couldn't speak a line of straight English. And when I told them, I said, here, even in our, the English medium schools, the teachers don't understand. So they were giving us a series of books which the children would read and then comment on.
So your question is, how long is this reading program going to train students?
So what I'm just trying to say is that there they said that let the children express themselves in their own tongue. Because that is very, very critical. So this is what I'm asking you in your reading program. Do they have the option to express themselves in their own language? Because that's where they can think critically and come up with their creativity, imagination, or solutions.
We completely agree with you, and that's exactly what we're aiming to do. To teach reading in the language the child understands, so that's mother tongue. Now, in terms of the teacher training, we're giving 2 years of teacher training to teachers. So over a 2-year period, so we're doing these cycles. A 2-year cycle in one school, well, many schools in one part of the country. And during that 2-year period, the teacher will be exposed to a lot of training and also a lot of visits and a lot of mentoring. So we want to, reinforce different teacher training methods so that they can really deliver. And we are going to be retesting the children to see if their level has gone up. And we fervently believe that it will be the case.
Right. Now can we take more questions? Let's have your question now.
So a quick question that we are having these long school hours thanks to the British system. Our children are coming back at around 4 or 5 o'clock. And then we have lots of, these distractions of tabs. Just give me one quick tip how to make a 4-year-old child to sit on a table and read a book. And the second question is that, sir, please, I would request you to extend your training to the private schools as well, because, lots of the students these days and the parents, they want to send them to the private schools, and the teachers there are not having any training. So if you're focusing on the, the local schools, please extend it to the private schools as well.
I think as a parent, you should be asking the private school administrations to have teachers with the right kind of training.
Pakistan में एक issue है, every bored housewife wants to become a teacher. Especially with these hi-fi schools. And they just want to have a year off until their kid grows up and then leave. How do you expect to train those women to pass on reading or whatever to those children? To the school I went to, we were given half an hour a class called character building. For 40 minutes we were left to write, read, think, whatever we had to do. So how do we get rid of these boring housewives, which is, I think, the biggest problem in Pakistan?
I think you just gave me an idea for a soap in Pakistan, boring housewives. Interesting title. Can we have your responses while we move the mic to the other side of the room, please? I know can we take more questions?
Let's ask them, the Oxford people.
Can we take more questions? Two more questions.
So I completely agree with the whole idea of private schools, and I swear I did not plant her in this room. We have a new project called the Private School Forum, and what we're going to do is we're addressing private schools, and we want to introduce reading and all these things. What we've also done is we've made loans available to private schools. We're focusing on what's called low-cost private schools. And so what we're going to do is, through the banks in the country, we've provided loan guarantees so that these schools can try to get money to improve both access and quality. And through the Private School Forum, which hasn't started yet, we're going to work with the private schools to apply for the loans and then to improve the quality, to include, of course, reading. And in terms of the bored housewives, I think it's great if they come and become teachers. That's wonderful, and we're more than happy to train them as well.
Don't make him or her sit. Okay? The moment you do that, it becomes regimentation. Take this book, sit down here, don't move for half an hour. No. First introduce him or her to that book. Give him the bit of idea. Read the story of it. Leave it half. And when he asks what happens next, you say read.
Thank you, Dr. Arfa. Thank you, Thomas. I think it was a very insightful session. I learned a lot. And one thing I can give you back as a moderator, and this is where the lack of reading and understanding comes through, which is a challenge for each one of us. We ask a question with the intention of completely leaving the person who has to respond startled in their tracks. In Urdu, we might call it la jawab kar diya. I think when we need to change our approach a little bit. We ask a question in order to seek an answer. That's one thing we need to do. I'd like to leave you with one particular extract I read about reading, which I think completely nails it. Again, the reference is English, so I hope that you'll be able to appreciate it. It goes something like 26 different shapes, known as letters, arranged in endless combinations, known as words. Lifeless until someone's eye falls upon them. But then a miracle takes place. Along the optic nerve, almost at the speed of light, these tiny symbols are flashed to the brain, where they're instantly decoded. The owner of the eye is changed too. These tiny marks can make him love or hate, laugh or cry, fight or run away. And what do we call this incredible chain of events? Reading, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.